also my husband. He is an incredible artist, educator, just all the things. Of course, I'm going to brag about him. But I believe that when it comes to listening to an artist talk about themselves as an artist and talk about their work, he does like a dynamic job. And I know that on August 9th, there are going to be questions for you all to answer as writers, as artists, about your practice as artists. And I just thought it would be beneficial to hear from someone talk about their work and talk about their journey in talking about answering questions when it comes to like an artist talk or a panel or someone randomly asking you about your practice and your work. Because even though on August 9th, we don't have a bunch of time for people to ask you when you all are up front about your work, but once the reading is over, there may be people who may come to you during the reception and ask you more about your piece, more about your journey, more about who you are as an artist. And so I just kind of wanted to give you all an example of the type of poise and commands and responses that might be beneficial for you to model and for you to see. And I think it's also something beyond August 9th that you all should be able to do confidently whenever someone is asking you about your writing or just you as artist/writer. So all you all need to do is listen. I'm gonna kind of ask down some questions after we're finished. If you have questions or if you're curious about his practice as an artist or anything he has said, feel free to ask questions. And then after that, what we'll do is we'll do a dry run of August 9th so that we can, you all can hear each other, read each other's bios so we can make sure we're saying names correctly. And it sounds the way you want it to sound. So this is sort of our first intro. We're going to do this from about now until 12:45, so about 30 minutes, okay? All right.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Can they ask questions during? If questions come up while we're having the conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and during. If something comes up during, feel free to raise your hand or just speak out. All right. So again, we're talking about not Donald's entire journey of being an artist, but more so the goal is to have him talking about his work. Okay. So hello.
Hello.
You're welcome. I think just wanted, if we could start with the beginning.
Okay.
And maybe you tell us about the first time someone sort of talked to you about talking about your work.
Nobody ever talked to me about talking about my work.
No one ever talked to you about?
No, nobody ever talked to me about talking about my work. But when you say, if I think about the beginning was that I was an artist comfortably being a visual artist because I was so quiet when I think about the beginning. So maybe subconsciously, I chose a discipline that allowed me not to have the responsibility to talk or to be on stage or to perform or to have an audience or to kind of be publicly critiqued. And I recognized how comfortable I was being quiet with being an artist. My first solo exhibition, which was in my early 20s, and I had a room full of a couple hundred people to see my work. And then they said, okay, now you got to say something. And I said what Russell Simmons says when he closed out Def Comedy Jam, which was thanks for coming out, good night. Literally, that was what I said. And it was the moment I became aware that I don't really talk about my work. I never really needed to. Up until my early 20s, making art even in an academic setting, it was performance based. It was my ability to maybe express myself through the work and my ability to master techniques and develop and grow with techniques. But talking about it was not a part of any structured conversation. It never came up. I realized, yeah, go ahead.
When you, in that moment, what was the response when you just said, thank you for coming out?
What was the audience's response?
Yeah.
I mean, they laughed.
They laughed.
But it was over. It was like I had been handed the microphone and I wasn't prepared. But I guess I was like the one in charge, so it was kind of like, oh yeah, I ain't about to say nothing. You know what I mean? That's basically what I said to everybody indirectly. Yeah, I thought it was a mistake though afterwards.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask you. Like, when did you recognize that?
That's when I recognized it.
That's when you recognized
Yeah, it was like, oh, I ain't gonna be able to make it as far as I'm trying to make it as an artist if I don't have the ability to be able to talk. And then at that same time period, I'm being required to write an artist statement. And I'm like, okay, what the heck is an artist statement? And then it's, what's your bio? So I'm being asked to talk about myself and talk about the work. And I struggled with it for a very, very long time.
Why do you think you struggled?
Because it wasn't something I had practiced doing. I hadn't practiced talking about the work. I thought I'd found me a safe little corner to hide in where I can just draw and take pictures and put it on the wall and let what I made speak for itself. I think what happened is I started getting frustrated with what people would say about my work. Like the misinterpretation of what I was doing was when I started becoming slightly aware of what I was actually trying to do. It was like I needed someone to be wrong about what they were saying just for me to start to become conscious of what I was trying to do or what I was trying to say.
In addition to like the misinterpretation and like people getting it like wrong, why else do you think it's significant for an artist to be able to speak to them?
Why do I think it's significant for an artist to be able to speak for or to their work?
Like to their-
Well, because the stuff that you're making is an extension of who you are. So not to be able to talk about your work really reveals a significant personal self issue that's going on. Like if we are artists and we care to express ourselves, and art is a form of communication, not being able to have a conversation about what you've made, it reveals kind of lack of understanding of self. And not that you can't make amazing work and not be able to talk about your work, because some amazing artists cannot. Their form of communication is very much the discipline that they've chosen or that chose them. But for me, being able to talk about my work just out loud in a conversation helped me strengthen the work. It was almost as if me talking about it helped me hear what I understand and what I don't understand and what people are getting from it or not getting from it. So I've been able to use talking about my work and talking about myself as an artist as a way to help me develop the work.
Can you say a little more about that? Like maybe with a...
So, like with an example?
Yeah.
So I can remember a self-portrait I did as a teenager that started winning awards. And whatever I made, it was a portrait of me, and I took a double exposure of another negative image and put these fence posts over my face. And so subconsciously I was expressing myself, but I never really thought about what I was doing or what I was trying to say. And people talked about this image a lot, and people still talk about this image. And it started like once I'm like 15 years later, I'm like 30, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, what was I really thinking? What was I trying to say? What was this about? And as I started to ask these questions, then what the image was about started to create new ideas for me. I was able to try to do on purpose something that I had done on accident. So the title of the image was Caged Dreams. So I'm like asking myself, what was it about? And Caged Dreams, well, what dreams? Like I was able to start to really interrogate myself in a way that gave me more to try to express. So I was able to make new work using some of what I imagined I was possibly talking about when I was 15. So I used not knowing why I made something as a way to challenge myself to express the possibilities of what I might have been trying to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes
Did that make sense?
So, do you think that if you had talked about it back then, your own perception of it back then, you would have been able to go back like you did now? You would have still been able to go back and find like your own meaning at your age and at your perception now that was maybe different from what you were when you were 15?
Yes. Well, see, I would argue that if I had the ability to articulate and share what was going on then, 15 years later, my perception would have changed, but I would have had 15 years of development. So like, let's say at 15, I created this piece, and all of what that piece was about or what was going on with me at the time, I didn't get a chance to really start to process it until 15 years later. So it was almost like I would have had more time. I'd have been processing it at 16, at 17, at 18. I had to discover at some point that I had never processed it. And I would imagine at 30, my perception of it would have been different than at 15. I just would have had more time with it. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you some of the questions that the students are going to respond to.
Okay.
And kind of mix that in with some of these other questions that are right here. But let's see, maybe this one. Let's start with this. What have you learned about yourself as a visual artist?
As a visual artist, what have I learned about myself? I mean, the easy answer is everything. I'd have made enough work that when I'm looking at the images that I've created, the images are a reflection of me. The people I'm around, my environment, what I'm attracted to, what I understand, what I don't understand. I've been able to use being an artist and a photographer as a way to document what my life's experience is outside of my body. So.
What do you think, based on the work that the content,
Mm-hmm.
what does it say about you or the type of person you are
This might not be the answer to your question, but whatever quote I just seen recently where it says, if you wanna know what a photographer is afraid of losing, look at what they photograph. Right. So I don't know if that answers the question, but your question made me think of that. And because what I hear is if you wanna know what an artist is afraid of losing, then look at what they make. If you look at the subject of what they make or what we make as artists, is probably touching on what we're afraid of losing. And I would argue for myself, at some point, I recognized that I had lost myself. I used my work to find myself. Just the act of making consistently and not being able to talk about my work and not being able to write an artist statement and not knowing where to start with a bio, it caused me to kind of develop myself in a way that I was able to reveal myself to myself. I stopped taking pretty pictures. I stopped shooting and making art for money because I'm being paid to say something for somebody else. It was okay, so what am I doing for no reason at all? What am I shooting for no reason at all? What am I drawing for no reason at all? What am I writing for no reason at all? And the things that I was making for absolutely no reason, once I started to investigate this stuff, it was I was teaching myself because I had been able to hide. You said, if you want to know what a photographer is afraid of losing, look at what they photograph, or a writer writes. Look at the journal.
What do you think? I know for me, this wasn't something that was practiced or taught. Why do you think professors or art teachers or, why is this a conversation that's missing? Talking about the work, teaching an artist how to talk about their work, how to talk about themselves as artists. I wonder why, like, that's not, it's like kind of a thing that you have to discover on your own.
See, I think when you are someone who expresses yourself creatively, whether you're a teacher or not, we find comfort in being able to communicate through what we make. So if I find comfort in expressing myself creatively, artistically, and I have some level of discomfort just vocalizing and being myself, I've already figured out how to move through the world like not being myself to some extent. So I'm not teaching it. And I would also argue in a teaching setting, most of the times the teachers aren't artists. The teachers, most of the time, are teachers. And at some point, that journey of discovering their full self and being their full self and being an artist stops. And maybe it stops at the point of being able to fully express yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's missing. I don't think it's being taught because I don't think teachers are teaching it, because I don't think teachers, whatever teachers we're talking about, have figured out why it's so significant that people learn this. And I would argue that the significance in learning how to talk about yourself and talk about your work is so you can continue to develop yourself and your work as an artist. This is how you don't get stuck, because you look up and however many years you made however much of what you've made, and then if you can sit and look at it and read it and study it and analyze it and question it, you can develop from wherever you were when you made whatever you made.
Yeah, because it turns out to be a huge part of being an artist, especially if you're going to be submitting your work and entering contests. Like, you have to write an artist bio, you have to write a statement, you know what I mean? And then when you have like an event, a reading, or a show, people are going to be talking to you about you and your work.
I thought selling art was about putting a price on the art, and that's how you sell it. What I learned is the way that you sell art is you tell the story, whatever the story is. And it was a huge learn. It was like, oh, so if I tell you that I messed up, my lens broke, I had to go back and get another lens. I came back, got the shot. The memory card had one shot left on it. I dropped the memory card, went back and found it. If I tell you that story, because that's what happened, it is what's making the image valuable. So the more investigation you do about yourself and your work gives you more conversations that you could comfortably have. And I started trying to have the conversation like in the formal art world, like with a curator or a gallery person or on a panel. I started trying to allow myself to treat the formal environment the same way I interacted with my informal environment. So if I'm talking to my cousins and kids about my work who don't care about all of the stuff that I've learned and all of the accolades and all of the significant places, if I can carry the conversation over, I was curious to know if I would be more comfortable. So I literally started having the conversation that I have with people who don't care about art. I started having those conversations with people who do. And it was helping me actually be able to communicate and be myself a little more, But I could remember being in college thinking that I was supposed to say the right thing, or what do they want to hear, or how am I supposed to talk about what I've made formally? And it doesn't exist. That's usually when you're not saying anything.
Yeah, and if there's an art to this, talking about your work, talking about you as an artist, what do you think the art is?
The art to talking about your work or yourself?
Or if there's like a way to successfully do it, what do you think is the answer?
We can take a deep dive into what my answer is, but my answer is simple. It's being honest. Like, you're trying to figure out what to say and think about what to say and prepare what to say. Ultimately, we're trying to figure out how to lie. Because if you don't have to calculate the truth, it's the easiest thing to remember. Like, I never have to prepare for a talk, literally. I never have to remember what to say about what I've made, because when I look at what I've made, there's a dialogue that automatically happens. And if I can comfortably tell the truth, then I can be successful at talking about my work or talking about myself. You know, I think we, for whatever reasons, think we're supposed to have the answers. But some of the most significant things that I've ever said in front of a crowd of people was, I have no clue to what the settings were on the camera. I didn't care, you know, or I didn't know what I was trying to do or what I was trying to say. I did it because it was in front of me, or I had the impulse to do it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's.
Not having the answer is sometimes the truth, but we try to, yeah.
Being honest.
It's being honest, which is hard because nobody's honest. And everybody's gonna be in condition to withhold and lie and perform. So, but it's that.
I'm gonna ask you again, go back to some of the questions that they're gonna be answering. So just replace writing with photography, or
It's natural.
when do you do your best writing, and what helps you get into a writing mindset?
So my best work is, I mean, I got levels to my process of making work. So I'm trying to think of what level to speak to this on. So if that question was writing, what phase of writing?
Yeah, the beginning.
So the capturing the idea?
Yeah, the very beginning, like thinking about the subject or the content.
Okay, I mean, the way I get into the mindset of when I'm first gonna capture an idea is I got 10 different forms of ways to capture the idea.
Okay, what are some of those?
I mean, like technically,
Yeah.
notes, audio recording, video, and it's instant, you know? So when something happens, I'm gonna try to make something in relationship to what happened as quick as possible. Because it seems like to me, that's where the truest form or whatever is happening. I mean, I can remember us talking about when your mom passed. And my whole thing to you was, you need to write now. You need to write right now. Because mentally, you will never be in the place that you're in like this, as intense ever again. So maybe when there's some level of high intensity, some high emotional state or place, you know, one that you don't want to have to reflect back on, but you kind of capture it while it's happening. So in real time is probably what I think the best or strongest way to capture an idea is in the moment.
So it's not the moments when you are, I was just thinking about like when you have a plan to go and shoot something versus it just naturally happens.
Well, for me, when I have a plan to go shoot, I don't really have a plan of what I'm going to shoot. I usually will try to create the proper condition for myself. So I'm going to go at a time of day where the lighting is a particular lighting. If I'm trying to make sure I'm creating something that I want to control the light and I want shadows a certain way. So I'm going to try to create the best condition, and then I'm going to still try to capture in real time, because the plan never works. So it's really just like putting yourself in the right environment for the possibility of being able to capture something in real time. I mean, I would imagine this very much when I'm around family or if I'm in the neighborhood. One, I got my camera with me, but I take notes all the time of what's going on, because instead of me trying to remember what I was thinking about that I might want to express myself towards, I'm capturing it, I'm logging it. You know, I have what I call my idea organization system. You know what I mean? Where it's like the stuff that I want to shoot, the stuff that I write, possible titles, you know, ideas for a particular subject, I'm logging it all the time. So when it's time for me to go make something, I'll just kind of go back to see what I haven't made yet in this log that I've created with these notes that I take obsessively.
If I were to ask you about advice that you would give to emerging artists who are figuring out how to talk about the work. Now, I know you said...
I was gonna say, can we go back? It was one more thing I wanted to share in relationship to the best time or how to get into like a creative zone.
Yeah, what helps you get into a writing mindset?
So I would argue the more you practice expressing yourself, you kind of stay in the mindset, no matter what the discipline is, right? But so let's say you got this log of ideas and you've been jotting them down forever. And then now you want to go back to one. What I tend to do when I go back to an idea that I was able to capture in real time is I will listen to music obsessively that helps put me back in the same mindset of whatever idea I logged. I'll watch movies, I'll read books. And when I say obsessively, I mean, I'll watch the same movie for a week because that movie is gonna start to trigger and spark ideas that are complementary to whatever idea I wrote down. Or I'll listen to a song or an album repeatedly, or I'll make a compilation of music that only speaks to the exact idea that I want influence or inspiration or motivation for. So what I do is what I call trying to wrap my mind around a particular idea. So I got idea A, and now I'm listening to music that's all they talking about. I'm watching movies all week, and that's all they talking about. So as I'm watching this stuff or listening to this stuff or reading these books, now what it's doing is it's helping me come up with more ideas that are complementary to idea A. I just wanted to share that.
Not to like feed it.
Yeah, like I'm feeding it literally.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it obsessively. So if I can sit and stay on social media for 4 or 5 hours a day, I'm on all platforms. I'm literally saving and liking only what pertains to the thing that I want my mind to focus on. So when I open up YouTube, when I open up TikTok, when I open up Instagram, it's feeding me what I want to think about. And what I want to think about is complementary to idea A. And I mean, I'll do it for as long as I need to do it, and then the subject will change, the idea will change.
Yeah. And you kind of did that. I was thinking about the bikes. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that was
you wanted to go shoot the bikes. You immersed yourself
I immersed myself into it.
in the world.
Yeah, like, and I took pictures that I actually didn't want. Nobody was popping willies in these pictures, but I'm like, well, let me take these pictures anyway. So now they're in my folder, they're on my phone, they're in my camera. Let me follow some pages on social media. Let me study the subject of the idea. And it just gives me all kinds of ideas. And then I look up and then then you produce work in relationship to whatever the idea is. Yeah. Yeah, no, but in my mind, it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to tell everybody that.
But back to the advice though, like you said that the advice is to be honest. But
Right.
that is the hard.
That's the hardest thing to do.
So what's the advice for that? Like what do you,
What's
like if you're trying to think about, like if you're getting ready to be on a panel or you're getting ready to have a reception full of folks who might come up to you and ask you questions about a line that you read.
Yeah.
And your advice is to be honest, but
How to do it?
How do
How do you do that?
that? What if it's a line that
You got to tell the truth. But I'm going to get to the tell the truth part. So the short answer to how to prepare to be honest is imagine that you're telling, let's say your best friend, whoever you can talk to where you can be yourself, right? Imagine that you're talking to that person and telling them the story of what happened. You want to, how to say it? So you want to prepare to not regret not saying what you should have said. So you want to imagine that you're talking to the person that you're the most comfortable with and being able to tell them the story. And in that story, you're not saying, I wish I really would have said this, or yeah, this is what I said, but this was the truth. Like, don't you know how you go back and you had an experience and then you telling a friend of yours what happened and they're like, well, did you say that? Or did you do that? And you're like, well, no, I didn't say that. I wish I would have said that. You want to visualize the conversation and the story after the opening. And when you're telling your friend about the opening, and if you're telling them, well, I was uncomfortable, they was asking me these questions, I didn't know the answer to the questions. Well, the truth is that you didn't know the answer. So you don't have any regret. Say, I really don't know. Because not knowing and not understanding is a part of the experience of being an artist. We kind of don't know where some of these ideas are coming from and why we do it, or why we feel the need to do it, or why we can't stop, or, you know, what it is that really makes us different. We have an impulse to do it, so we're following it. That's why I keep going back to the I don't know. Because it's one level to be conscious of what you're making when you set it up and you decide that you want to say something or write something or make something. But then there's a whole nother level where you're kind of pulling and responding from your subconscious. So I don't know if that's confusing at all, but try to imagine the conversation where you're going to be telling the truth. In that conversation, tell that same truth at the opening, on the panel, in the statement, in the bio, versus having regret. I wish I would have said this when they asked me that question.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just some of the, especially for writers who write like creative nonfiction or nonfiction, or, I mean, it can even, you know, the truth is sometimes in poetry as well, but like when I'm thinking about some of their work, when they're talking about friends or family members, and that family member being in the audience,
Yeah.
what you want to say, afraid to say.
Well, and this is in that specific example, talking about people and that's in the room and that sort of thing, what I've done is I don't talk about the people. So if I put up a show and it's got all these family members in it, and when I'm looking at it, I know what caused me to make this work, or, you know, if somebody might have passed away, or if it's a sore subject, sensitive subject, I don't talk about them, I talk about myself. Mm-hmm. See, my argument is if you talk about yourself, you don't have anything to argue about, you know? So yeah, you might have wrote something or said something about your mother, but it doesn't have to be about your mother. You know, this is what I saw, this is what I witnessed, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, versus this is what is pointing the finger versus speaking from the I, you know? But it's one of the hardest things to grapple with is how is everybody around me going to feel about me talking about them? And it's probably one of the most stifling things an artist can experience, or a person trying to express themselves, or a person trying to communicate something, is what is everybody going to think and what is everybody going to feel? So give that up, relinquish that power and control, because you don't have power or control over it. I've offended people with the most subtle things I've done, and people embrace me for the most aggressive things that I've done. And I realized that I can't control it. So for me, the goal became to be myself and accept the consequences that come with being myself, versus me accepting the consequence that comes with not being myself. I always say you can, when you avoid conflict externally, you create conflict internally. So I just grew out of the internal conflict. I mean, I was scared to move back home to Cleveland to take all of these pictures, because what's everybody gonna feel when I start talking about why I'm taking pictures of all these people around me? How they gonna feel? Yeah. They don't even come to the stuff. I ain't even have to worry. It's like I don't even gotta worry about it.
About an experience Don had with police, and in this persona poem where I'm speaking in his voice, one of his friends thought, I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing
I don't,
this.
yeah.
But one of his friends thought that, he thought that Donald wrote the poem.
Right.
So he questioned why Donald said what he said. And I had to insert myself like, wait, first, Donald did not write the poem. And then two, that line isn't even referring to you.
Right.
So it's just thinking about people being offended.
And taking things personal.
And they're not even accurate about.
Yeah, and I thought it was ridiculous, because it's like, dude, this is her book.
Yeah, it was my book.
So why do you think I wrote this, for one? You know what I'm saying? Like, well, I didn't say any of it. I told the story, and the story wasn't even about you. So it's like multiple levels of somebody taking it personal. It's like, dude, this is not about you. You just feel guilty.
So anyway.
Yeah.
So speaking from the I, if you're a person that lies to yourself constantly, and you got a hard time being honest with yourself, how do you create an environment to speak from the I, if that makes sense?
Well, what I hear, tell me if what I'm hearing is the question. If you want to be able to speak from the I, but you lie to yourself constantly, How do you know what the truth is? I mean, is that like?
That sound like,
But like environment.
yeah, it's like how do you create the environment to not lie to yourself?
So the first environment you have to create of being honest is the environment inside of your body. So that's the first environment. And I don't know if you were talking about an external environment, but it's an internal environment. And so if you're somebody who's not honest with yourself, then you know you can't trust yourself, which means you have to investigate everything that you do and everything that you say. And fortunately for everybody in the room, to whatever extent, you're artists. You have a discipline that you're already practicing. This is where you can comfortably investigate. When you're investigating yourself to see if you're being honest, the first level is 3 levels to telling the truth. And the first level is stating the facts, right? This is what I experienced. This happened. I drove down the street. I made a right when I got to the corner. Stating the facts. Level 2, thoughts and feelings about the facts. Okay, so what were you thinking and how did you feel when you drove down the street and made a right at the corner? Level 3 is being able to find the lie that you told yourself. So what's the lie that you told yourself for when you drove down the street and made a right at the light? Oh, well, the car had its blinker on and that's the reason why I made a right. Oh, the police was parked across the street. That's why I made a right. You know what I mean? Like, it's being able to find the lie. But you got to be honest with yourself that you're dishonest. Because once you're honest with yourself about being dishonest, it starts to become easy to become aware of who you dishonest with. What are you dishonest with them about when you're being dishonest? You got to investigate everything that you're saying and everything that you're doing. Am I just saying that? Is this the truth or am I just saying this? You got to ask yourself that. Because then you're going to say, oh, okay, I lied to my mama all the time, especially when I ... Oh, I lie with my cousin. And then you start to realize that oftentimes we lying to avoid conflict. You know, like when we can feel it in our gut and then we say something to get out of the situation and then we go back and tell our best friend the truth, it helps you see what the lie was. And then you got to try to practice being in that situation again and uncomfortably telling the truth. Telling the truth is uncomfortable because most of the people you're going to be being honest with are dishonest. It's like it's an unspoken requirement that gets created. If I'm a dishonest person, I want you to be dishonest. So if you're going to tell me the truth, I have to say something back to you to make you stop being honest. Yeah. I don't know if that was helpful.
Any other questions before we take a break?
So y'all ready? So everybody ready to be honest and tell the truth when people coming up to you asking you questions that you ain't get a chance to prepare for?
And they actually have the questions that I'm going to be the person asking them.
Okay.
But I think it's helpful that you're speaking about honesty because it's not about answering those. When I ask the question on the night, it's not about trying to memorize what you've been practicing. It's about telling the truth.
Y'all like having the questions before? Okay. See, I'm a don't give me the questions before kind of person. And
Figure out the right thing to say.
which is the lie.
Right.
See, we just call it the right thing to say. But what it really is not telling the truth. That's why I prefer not to have the questions. Oh, I'm gonna send you the questions down. Oh, don't send them the questions because I'm gonna overthink it and I ain't gonna be able to stop thinking about it. Then I'm gonna obsess over it. No.
Try to practice.
Right. Well, I'm gonna try to really figure out what the truth is. I'm gonna try to investigate. Give it to me in real time and let me speak from the heart, from the truth. Yeah. But y'all will get there, maybe, hopefully.
All right, we're gonna take a break, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's come back at 2. Okay, 2 minutes after 1.